Hello. Mm-mm. 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 Na, 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 na. Mm. When the moon hits your eye. Like a big. Oh my gosh. Quit looking at the clock. Pink. One lonely participant is riveted. Mm. Hmm. I don't know what that even means. I guess I'll look it up. Hmm. Oh, ah. Boom. Hi, Carly.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is new to need a passcode. They've never, Zoom hasn't done that before. So you're on. That's exciting. We'll give everyone a few minutes. Hey, what? Kate's there. Hillary's there. Yes.
Success.
All right, now we're cooking with gas. I mean, let's hope that everybody either thinks to look at Slack or my invitation showed the passcode, so I don't know what the heck.
Oh.
Did you get yours from the message from EAA or from the Slack?
From Slack, because I asked, I couldn't find the path.
Maybe I didn't put it in the Slack.
My email for for the Zoom link didn't have a passcode. Had the meeting ID, but not the passcode.
How dare it? Well, I will fix that. I will make sure to put the passcode in future one. Strangely, mine didn't show a passcode, but when I went on Zoom, there she was down at the bottom of when I clicked show invitation.
Oh.
So let's just take a breath. Now that we're here. I know for sure that one person will always be about half an hour late, and another person will probably not make it ever live because of the time differences. But that's okay. That's why we take these occasions. So I'll just start, and let's hope that if anybody else is having trouble getting on, let's hope that they, I don't know, email me, go on Slack. Yeah, I'll check my email once in a while. I hate to do that to you, but there's nothing on there right now, so we're okay. Okay, welcome to Developmental Editing for Fiction. My name is Pat Dobie. I see all your names are there. Great. I think you can all see and hear me. Hillary's telling somebody to be quiet. There's no secrets here. Do you have children with you?
Dogs.
What's that?
Sorry, dogs.
Dogs.
Yeah, mine decided just a minute ago that he was gonna sit in his bed and squeak a squeaky toy for the first time in like 2 weeks.
Aw. Knows you're busy.
Exactly. He's like, "Oh, you're talking to somebody that I can't see, so clearly
Yeah.
I have to be annoying."
Yeah. Okay, well, here we are. It's a Zoom class, ideally, using a PowerPoint slideshow to help guide you through the material. You'll get all the slides after with the script. I go off script quite a bit. So if you're, if you remember me saying something and then you get the PDF with the slides and the script, and what you think I said isn't in there, you can just send me a note on Slack or watch the vid if you can pinpoint this sort of the area, the timing. There's 3 lessons. Each one is between half an hour and 45 minutes long. There's time for Q&A, and there's a health break partway through, 5 minutes. 5 minutes, because we only got 2 hours, so we're not going to waste time getting coffee and meandering around our kitchens. Oh, by the way, I'm in a storage closet right now. I just moved, so I miss my office. It just seems like a crazy size. It was 8 by 10. This thing is tiny, but anyway, it's just temporary. If you haven't muted yourself, it looks like most people have, then just try doing that now and stay muted until you want to say something. You can try raising your hand. I just set Slack there. What are we on? Zoom. I just set it so that it'll do a little ding if you raise your hand. So we'll see. I do tend to forget to check the chat, except on breaks, the break. So if you have an important question, just interrupt me. There's quite a bit of material, not so much in this first class, but as we go, it's like getting on a train that just picks up speed and then careens around a mountain pass. So if you miss something during the class or you can't come to one, it's no big deal. You can always ask me questions on Slack. You can email me, or you can watch the video, or all 3. And I think we're probably all pretty familiar with Zoom, but if not, you can adjust speaker view and hide yourself and do all kinds of fun things. I just lost somebody. Okay, I'll try not to get too distracted. I tend to fidget quite a bit too, so I hope that's not too disturbing. Here we go. Introductions. Yes, you have to talk. This is the city where I live, Vancouver, Canada. That's the downtown core. So I'd like to know, just if we could do a quick go around. I will call names because it's just wastes less time. What your name is, where you live, and if you're currently editing or writing fiction. And I saw on Slack that we had some good intros already, so there's some background out there. But if you could just say a couple of sentences now for those who haven't had a chance to read anything on Slack. I know people have mixed feelings about Slack, and I'm one of them, but that's what we're using. So I'll start with Carly.
I'm Carly. I currently live in the Kansas City area. I'm originally from Chicago. I've kind of lived all over. I lived in northern Wisconsin for a while, and then I spent 2 years in Seattle, which was beautiful, and I miss it, but so expensive. City to visit, not to live in, unfortunately. I currently write fiction. I'm currently doing some developmental editing for a friend of mine who is on her like third iteration of of this series that she's been trying to write for years, and I think we've finally hit on the final version. So, but I'm not doing anything professionally at this point. I have not. Hope to very soon in the future, which is why I'm taking the class, because I wouldn't feel comfortable selling myself as a developmental editor without some instruction first, because that's just the way my brain works. I need some practical guidance on how to do it properly. So
Love it. And I'll try not to interject because we'll take forever, but I didn't have any training at all, and I tell you, it was stressful. I had to figure it out as I went along. So I think you're smart to take a class. If there had been classes when I started, I definitely would have taken one. There were certificate programs, but I didn't want to get into that.
Yep, I'm the same. I'm not a fantastic student unless I'm super interested in something, and I am super interested in this. And like I said in my intro on Slack, this is the only course that I found that had a practical where you actually work on a manuscript during class, which is exactly what I wanted. So
Perfetto. Okay, great. Kate.
I'm Kate Schieber, and I live in New Zealand right now, but grew up in Ohio and raised my kids in Oregon. We moved here about 5 years ago, and I started my editing business at about the same time. Mostly I do copy and line edit because that's where my brain is, usually more about the word craft stuff and not the big picture structure stuff. But I often work with beginner writers who need that a lot. So usually I get everything all pretty, and then I go, oh, wait a minute. now that I can see the forest for the trees, I see you have a big gap right here. And that's not the right way to do it. I need to see that stuff faster, sooner, easier, before we've cleaned it all up. So I really need instruction on how to do developmental edit in a logical sequence. So thank you so much for offering this.
Namaste. It's my pleasure. It is a different type of thinking for sure. And I have a whole lesson on how not to line edit when you're trying to developmental edit.
Good.
Yeah, otherwise you don't make very much money because it takes so much longer. So I'm not being crass, but we're not in this for completely.
Not efficient the way I do things. So thank you.
Excellent. My little brother lives in New Zealand. Yeah. If I could
Maybe
remember
I know
where, near Thames, Coromandel Peninsula. Yeah, maybe you've met him. Kidding.
Small country.
Yeah, right. It's not that small. Okay. Right. Thank you, Kate. Hillary.
Hi. So I'm Hillary. I just moved to Ithaca, New York about a month ago from Southern California. So adjusting to that difference. I'm currently, I wouldn't say I'm editing, but I'm interning for a small independent publisher. I'm trying to learn how to become an editor. So I'm kind of just beginning that career transition, but really loving everything I've learned so far. And I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. Maybe we can pick your brain about small publishing.
Oh, sure. With all I've learned in just the last few weeks. I was a high school English teacher for 8 years before that. So probably I'm better at brain picking in that regard, but
We'll see. There's a lot of teachers transitioning into editing. That's purely anecdotal, but I've had many teachers go through the class because it's dangerous to teach in the US, and or it can be. And Also, it's, you know, in Canada too, it's underpaid, overworked, they gotta get their own supplies half the time, stuff like that, so. So you're in good company. Alan.
Hi, I'm in that company. I'm a former high school English teacher. Did not leave for the danger necessarily, but all the other things very true. Also, I'm in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico now, and in Mexico probably for a while going forward. Not sure about Puerto Vallarta, but it's pretty great here, so probably. But before that, was in Portland, Oregon. Started my teaching career in Brooklyn, New York, where I was living for about 5 years, and I'm from Boston, Mass originally, so I've been around a little bit. I'm kind of just getting, so I've sort of been in this long ramp up to editing. I have hung out my shingle, sort of, kind of, because my website's still in progress, so it's not quite up yet, but I have worked in a novel, which is now on Amazon, which Pat gave me some help with in the very early stages. We're deciding if I wanted to take it. I see myself more as a nonfiction editor, probably, ultimately, but I would like to have some fiction in my pocket and certainly the ability to take some business. This novel came my way through I'm also a writing tutor to kids still, and this came my way through a family that I've been working with the kids in that family for years. So it was an uncle of theirs who wrote this book. So, and it was a great experience. I definitely learned a lot. I did a developmental edit and then a line edit. So really got to see both of those things really well. Had a good time doing it. Definitely here for more formal instruction and guidance.
Excellent. That's good to hear. That novel came out pretty fast, in my opinion, because it was over 100,000 words, wasn't it? Or do I have that wrong?
He had it down to about 90 or so.
Oh, great.
But it was a lot. Multi-generational historical saga from ancient China by a writer who'd never written anything before.
Yeah.
Outside of an office. So it was an interesting project.
You got it, you know. Oh, don't get me started. Okay. Olivia, thank you for making it on here, and I apologize for the passcode. It just didn't show up on my Zoom invite, so everybody had the same issue. Sorry about that.
I was panicking. I'm like, oh no, not the first day.
Yeah. Don't worry. We're still getting oriented, so.
Awesome. So just general introduction. I'm Olivia. I'm in Ohio. I actually have no editing experience, no professional editing experience. I'm actually a federal employee, but I've always been drawn to books and publishing. I kept saying no because I kept thinking that it wasn't really a viable career choice. And now I'm following my intuition. I would really like to work most with authors who are writing fiction and who are from marginalized communities, because I feel like those stories kind of don't really get told in the way that the authors and the readers who want to read those books, they don't get told in the way that they, sorry, it's been a long day.
Yeah, no worries.
They just don't get told. And there are a lot of different genres that people want to read that just aren't usually published in traditional publishing. So I would like to fill that gap. And yeah, so that's basically it about me.
Excellent. Thank you. I think that's, it's good. It does get easier to market if you have a niche. So, and that's a great one. That's doing some good in the world too. Okay. Tracy, you don't have to turn on your camera. Did you want to introduce yourself? There you are.
Hi there.
Oh,
and I can't see myself, so I have no idea what everybody's looking at. I don't know. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so I'm Tracy, and I too live in British Columbia. I'm on the other side of the province in the interior. Yeah, and I guess formally I've been writing forever, and For the last decade or more, I've been doing a lot of blog work and social media for a variety of different businesses. But 18 months ago, I decided to commit to myself that I was going to do the writing that I've been telling myself I'm going to do for myself. And I have done. And I actually had the experience. I really had no idea of the process. Once you've written something, and if you want to get it published, what are the steps? So, I went through the beta reading process, and then I actually hired a developmental editor, and I had never heard of that before. It was a great experience, and she was fabulous. And yeah, so as I'm kind of exploring, leaving social media in particular, I love the blogging, but social media is really no longer my jam. It would be great to transition into something else that is directly related to my experience and what I'd like to continue doing. So I'm really excited about the course.
Excellent. Well, try not to beat that excitement out of you over the next 5 or 6 weeks. It'll still be fun. We're gonna have fun. Okay. So what we will learn in developmental editing for fiction, excuse me for using paper, but I haven't taught this course since the spring and I forgot everything. So when Susanna asked me to teach this class, I knew it had to be learned by doing. I don't see any other way. I learned how to developmentally edit by doing it. I also learned from some of my teachers when I went back to school to learn how to write better. But we're going to start it easy. This week is not learn by doing. You get the manuscript next week. So I want to prepare you a little bit for the process. This week, we're going to look at the publishing industry. And there's also assigned reading, particularly the Peter Ginna book, that will give you a good overview of that area. There's essays in there. You don't have to read just the ones I suggested, but you can read anything you want in there. We're also going to spend some time on the craft each week. I divided it into categories because, oh, excuse me, Danica, the gal who's only going to make it half an hour in is looking for the passcode. I know it's not funny, but what can you do? You gotta laugh. So it's 55555. Pardon me. We'll meet Danica on the break, I hope. There we are. It was a personal message. I realized after I posted it twice. Okay. So first up will be the job landscape for freelance fiction developmental editors. We're going to start that this week, and we'll continue throughout the course, just with explanations and illustrations and examples. Even if you're only planning to dip your toe into it this week or do it part-time, for a while, or have it as just one of many offerings, it's good to know where people get their work. Then you're going to learn the main tools. You probably already use them. Manuscript markup, where you write in the comments in the margins of a manuscript as you read it. You don't have to do it that way. Some people work on hard copy. Some people use different tools, but those are the norm in the editing business. So the manuscript markup is one tool. It's kind of the product of the first step, which to me is a close reading of the manuscript. And then there's another tool, which is the book map. Not every developmental editor does them, and not everyone wants to do them. But I love them. I don't love doing them. I love what they show me about a manuscript. And then the third one is an editorial letter. That's important. So we spend a whole class on that. I give you feedback on your manuscript markup and on your editorial letter. I don't give feedback on the book maps because there's no wrong way to do it. But I will send them off to the writer, which, just to clarify, the writer will get your stuff unless I don't give it to her. So it's a real thing. It's a real world situation. The fourth main tool is something I offer with each developmental edit. I have 2 booked this week. I think it's 2. And that's a video chat with the writer. they can, they're very useful, and I'll get into that, why I think they're useful. Starting next week, but all the way through, basically. I find the offer important, not just for closing out the edit, but also for maintaining a relationship with the writer, so that if they are a series writer, you become their go-to person for all their books until they outgrow you or you get too busy or whatever. Oh dear. Okay. Guthrie sends apologies. Her son is throwing up. All right. There's a step-by-step how-to, which starts basically next week. And these are how to do the steps involved in analyzing fiction manuscript on the big picture level. So the order of lessons reflects the order of work, how I approach a project. I think after the course, you can develop your own approach to every project. Mine is just one way to do it, but I found it allows me to be pretty efficient, and there's not much. I would say there's probably not a lot that I miss. I mean, a writer might not agree with all my opinions, but I am able to form opinions by following these steps and make suggestions that work with the manuscript that they wrote, not with the manuscript that I would have written if I were them. So that's important. When you do your own work after the course, you know, some people read a manuscript multiple times, some people read it only once. I do kind of a combination. I read it once and then I do a book map, which involves kind of skim reading it again. But at least once you've done it my way, you can adapt it to whatever works for you. Okay, professionalism. I'm big on that. I don't like missing deadlines. I don't like keeping writers waiting, especially with fiction. It's very personal, or it can be, especially for novice writers. So you don't want to be flaky in this business. It's a good way to lose clients. And also you can actually, you know, you can make somebody nervous to give their manuscript to an editor again. It can really affect how they think about the profession. So it's kind of business philosophy for me, and I just do it by putting myself in the client's shoes. From first contact, sounds like a sci-fi thing, from first contact through delivery of the edit and the post-edit talk. I also keep learning craft all the time. I mean, I've been writing for a long time, but I wrote a bunch of bad novels before I wrote a good one, and even that didn't get published. So it's, you know, it's craft is like a bottomless well. And I also kind of like, I provide a good container. I'm responsive to questions and emails, and I don't leave them hanging for long periods. Speaking of clients, you might want to work with certain people, you know, or in certain types of fiction. You might like coming of age stories, or, you know, science fiction. So we're going to do some thinking and self-examination about how to attract and retain the writers you want to work with. And that'll start this week with the questionnaire in the homework packet. I'm pretty sure I put it on Slack as well. The Slack one is a Word document. It's just, I think it's 3 pages. The homework packet is a PDF, but I can send it as a Word if that's easier for everybody. Or I can send it as both, actually. Okay. The course promise. This course will give you everything you need to know to hang out your shingle as a developmental editor of fiction. If you know a lot about the craft of fiction, you might be able to work immediately with intermediate or even advanced writers. If you have some catching up to do on the craft side, for example, maybe you don't know a lot about dramatic structure or how to diagnose issues in a scene, you will still be able to work with novice writers because you will probably know more than they do once you get through this course. It's got just some basic groundwork that I've picked up over the years and made into a module for each class, except this one and except the last one. The point is, you have to start somewhere, and you will be able to start after this course. Okay, here we are, lesson 1. You're going to roll your eyes at this one because it's all about me. Who are developmental editors anyway? This is just to provide context. Developmental editing for fiction has a long history, and it's changed quite a bit over recent decades in particular. This man on the slide, does anybody recognize him? Old guy in a suit, smoking a cigarette at work. He's
Is that Perkins? Is that
yes,
Maxwell Perkins?
Maxwell Perkins. He's like, you have to be into the history of it, but you know, to know that. But he's the gold standard probably for developmental editors. He's famous. He worked with and mentored and loaned money to big names in American fiction from the 1920s onward, like F. Scott Fitzgerald, Thomas Wolfe, Ernest Hemingway. Notice they're all guys, all men. Nowadays, it's far less common to find a Maxwell Perkins at an editing house at a publishing house, because fiction doesn't really get developmentally edited at publishers to anywhere near the degree it used to. Because publishers are interested in books that are ready to go. It's rare that they'll buy a book that needs a lot of work in the developmental aspect, where the story doesn't work, or there's big holes in the plot, or the character arc isn't developed. The exception might be writers who already have a history with the publishing house, but for a new writer, it needs to be pretty good to get looked at, to get considered. So they'll often hire freelance editors, publishing houses, not just developmental editors, but also copy editors. So although we don't work for a publishing house and might not, there's still an aspect of recognizing and fostering talent if you're a freelance developmental editor. So we're going to explore that mentorship aspect over the next 6 weeks as well. You'll end up working with writers that really become not attached exactly, but they really appreciate that you're helping them with their stuff. Okay, so this is an overview of tonight's class. I'll just give it bare bones. We're going to start with the big picture, which is the job landscape. Who's hiring freelance developmental editors, and where do we fit in a writer's trajectory for any particular manuscript? The second lesson is all about the course, actually, what to expect. I'll just go through its flow, and you can ask any immediate questions. You'll get, I call them packets or workbooks. You'll get a document after class, anywhere from 8 to 30 pages. And sometimes they actually are meant to be used as a workbook. You'll see when you see them, but the other times they just repeat information I've given, but in a more kind of developed manner. I also include excerpts from books, stuff like that. So, and they also have the course schedule, and the first one does. The third lesson is all about you. It's kind of, you might already know what you want to work on and who you want to work with and what you like, but it's always good to take a step back and look at your recent reading. What have you been reading lately? Do you read self-published stuff? Do you read only traditionally published books? I go to the library, so it's mostly traditionally published. I only read self-published books because of work, but I am not, I believe that they are equal now, and it just depends on the writer. Traditionally published, there's gatekeepers, so they have to be a certain standard. Self-published, there's much more of a spectrum, but I have worked on some self-published books that were just excellent and would stand up there with any traditional published books. And I'll give a few examples of just writers who didn't want to deal or had been traditionally published, had a bad experience, and decided to do it on their own, various ways. Okay. And let's see, then finally, we'll go over the assignment, which is easy. And you can ask any questions. And I'll send out the replay. It takes a while for the replay to download from Zoom, and then edit it, because there's always this period where I'm just staring slack-jawed at the screen, so I cut that out. And if I lose the internet, I cut out the fumbling there, so it takes a little while. I just don't want people to have to sit through that twice, but you'll get the replay either tonight or tomorrow morning. And well, Kate, I don't know, what is it there for you? Well, wait, let me guess, is it 10 a.m.? All right, that's enough. And there's also Slack if you have questions, or you can email me, pat@lucidedit.com. If you email Susanna, she will send it to me anyways, but might as well email me directly. On Slack, I'm there a couple of times a day, Monday to Friday. I'll pop in on weekends because all this stuff is due either Sunday night or Monday morning if you have an assignment. So I'll be there. So you might work on them on the weekends if you have day jobs during the week, and I will be there to pop in and see. If you want to make sure I see a question on Slack, do the @PatDoby thing. So I'll get a little ding on my phone. Okay, finally we're at lesson 1. The big picture. Who's hiring freelance developmental editors? And where do we fit in a fiction writer's career trajectory? Some of you already probably know where most of your clients will come from. Some of you might not. But I'm going to zoom right out. What are the paths to publication? Basically, there are 2. There's a third one called hybrid, and there's kind of variations. But hybrid, because it's the writer pays for services, I consider it self-publishing. It's got a more kind of what's the word? I forget what the word is, but it's managed. It's more of a managed experience. Okay, so we're going to be on this publishing landscape for a little while. Most of the time, if you're taking this course, I think your clients might mostly be individual writers. Whether they're aiming for traditional publication and decided to get an edit to get their stuff up so they can send it to an agent, or they're just going to self-publish immediately. I mostly work with traditional, with individual writers. I have done some manuscript evaluations for a small press, but they don't pay very well. So, it's I'm not a money grubber, but I do like to have kids. So many small presses operate on a shoestring. I don't know why I'm getting so fumbly about the money. Some people call self-publishing writers indie writers. That's fine. I don't, because sometimes I do, but most of the time I don't, because there's also this category called independent presses, which are small presses that publish more than one writer. Self-publishing writers, they only ever publish their own work. Okay, traditional publishing. I do work with about 30% of the people I work with are aiming for traditional publishing. They're looking for an agent. So just to also zoom out, I'm not sure about, I work with people from all over the world. I've worked with writers in the US, that's the bulk of my work. Canada, Germany, Belgium, the UK, Ireland, Asia, and Australia. But the bulk of my clients are in North America, and all of my clients write in English. North Americans are not the world's most avid readers. I've been reading a bunch of publishing statistics. There's 5 other countries that read more, but it doesn't matter. They're a huge market for books. It's in the billions of dollars. So there's a huge publishing industry in North America. It's New York based. And then there's multinationals, which are based in Germany and some in London. So even if you only work with Americans or writers in North America, it's good to be aware of the global nature of the publishing business. The more you know, the more you can help the writers you work with. Okay, and in North America, the traditional publishing landscape consists of several groups. There's the big 5, multinational corporations. They have hundreds or thousands of employees. They publish thousands of books a year. They have many imprints. So there's 5 of them. You don't have to remember this, but there's Macmillan, HarperCollins, Hachette Book Group, Penguin Random House, and Simon & Schuster. And each of those might have 20 to 40 or 50 imprints inside them, partly because the big publishers bought up little independent presses over the last 20, 30 years, but also because there's certain superstar editors, acquisitions editors that have a certain sensibility, and they might get their own imprint. If I could think of one, I'd say it, but my mind's a blank. Then there's mid-sized independent presses like Grey Wolf. There's an essay from I think the publisher in Grey Wolf in the Jana book, or Source Books, and they might publish hundreds of books a year, or 100 books a year. University presses also publish fiction. I have a couple of friends whose fiction has been published by university presses. And they might fall under this category or the next size down, which is a small press or a micro press. They typically would have only a handful of employees or might even be a solo enterprise. Hybrid presses, I mentioned, they do publish books. They offer the full gamut of services. So editorial, marketing, design, PR. They can be good. There isn't the stigma. They're not necessarily a vanity press. Some still are. Vanity press is when the writer is just being humored by the publisher, and they have absolutely no intention of making their book sellable. But the thing to remember about hybrids is they don't make their money from selling books mostly. They make most of their money from selling services to writers. So they can be good if a writer is impatient, and you might even work with a hybrid press if you want to get a bunch of manuscripts without having to do all the selling yourself. So I wouldn't rule them out. Okay, what is the process? Well, anybody here who has tried to get their fiction traditionally published will know. In fiction, you have to write the manuscript. In nonfiction, you can get away with a book proposal. But you need a complete manuscript, and it's in a query letter. So it's a query package is usually what agents will want to see before they will say yes or no to reading the whole manuscript. So there's a letter. Sometimes they want a synopsis and anywhere from 10 to 50 pages of the book. Some editors specialize in query packages, so they'll have that as a service. I'll help you with your query letter. I'll polish up your first 50 pages and so on. I'll help you write your synopsis. Yeah. Then depending on what type of publisher the writer wants to work with, if they want a big publisher, one of the big five or any of those imprints, they need to submit to literary agents. If they want to work with a small press, they can submit directly to the publisher quite often. Mid-sized university presses sometimes take direct submissions as well. And they query until an offer comes, or until they lose their mind or give up. In many cases, the writers I work with don't know a lot about traditional publishing. They just know that it's the route they want to take. They don't want to self-publish their book. The submission process can take months or years. It's a whole process. It takes kind of a tough hide and, a will of iron. If you have a really hot manuscript or a really good premise, high concept, then it's a lot easier, but it still takes quite a lot of work to end up with the right the right agent and then the right publisher. Personal experience of the process can come in handy, but you really don't need it. You don't need to be a writer to work with writers. You don't need to be a writer to developmentally edit fiction at all. So I talk from the perspective of somebody who's done some of the stuff that writers do when they will come and ask to work with you, but it absolutely made no difference to the quality of my editing, I'm pretty sure. What it does help with is I can help normalize their experience. It's because I know I've done it, and I have lots of writing friends, but you can do that too. Even just if you've never written a word, you can, as an editor, you'll become familiar with the publishing industry over time. Okay, so why would a writer hoping to publish traditionally pay a freelance developmental editor? The three main scenarios I've experienced are they're pitching agents and getting no response, with just crickets. This doesn't mean that their stuff is bad necessarily. It could be that they're pitching the wrong agents, but that's one reason why they might seek out developmental editing. They're being asked by agents to revise and resubmit. That's actually kind of a good thing. If the agent likes your stuff, but wants it improved. So sometimes writers are, they're ready to spend money on getting the holes in their book looked at by a professional reader. or they have an agent. The novel is actually on submission to acquisitions editors at publishing houses, and nobody's buying it. So the agent might say to them, maybe you should get an editor to look at your book and just see what the, what the problem is. Agents won't usually submit something that they don't feel is ready, but there's my agent said, maybe you should hire an editor because it got turned down. The manuscript she shopped around for me got turned down by 25 of the big 5 imprints. But the feedback was so diverse that I didn't know, you couldn't take it as a way to revise. It wouldn't be useful because one person would say, well, it's too fast and paced, and the other would say, oh, it's really slow. So you can't do much with that. You need one person. Okay, so that's traditional publishing. My experience with writers aiming for traditional publishing is that their prose is really good. They definitely have a leg up on, they're not a novice writer by the time they come to seek a developmental edit. That being said, I've had 2 novice writers approach me in the last month wanting to be on the New York Times bestseller list. One had a collection of 2 novellas and 2 short stories, and that doesn't sell. The bestseller lists are all about numbers, and so that writer didn't even realize that there would never be that kind of book on a bestseller list unless, for example, Stephen King wrote it. So you will do some educating. It doesn't hurt to get yourself up to speed. It took me years. I had no information on publishing for the first 5 years I was an editor. I just thought it was all about the book, but I gradually, got educated. So it's not mandatory, but it doesn't hurt. Okay, self-publishing. This will be over soon. It's so popular. There's something like 300 million books self-published every year. Don't quote me on these statistics. The stigma is disappearing because writers have access to high quality technology that can help them produce a good book. And they have access to trades online like editors and cover designers and all that stuff. Some writers, so quality can be high, but it isn't always. Some writers won't pay for editing at any level. They're not your customer base. Others treat it as an accepted cost. I've worked with a couple of self-publishing writers who do series, and they will actually put quite a lot of money into the editing, the cover design, getting maps done if it's one of those fantasy or science fiction books that requires a map of the story world. They treat it like a business, and they make pretty decent money. Some writers I work with, they don't have the money for every level of editing, so they'll ask for, say, I'll have done a critique for a writer, and they have so many prose issues that I'll just do them a bullet list of all the stuff they need to get somebody to look for in their manuscript. Can't be me because they don't have the money for both types of editing. In my opinion, the story is more important but they're both really important. So I try to help them out, but they can't always do every level. And self-publishing writers, they can be more entrepreneurial by nature. I think they might be, because there's a lot of work involved in self-publishing a book. Writing it is only the first step of many, but that's true of traditional publishing too. Okay. Let's see now. Writer's traits. Should not have blanket statements like this. Many treat editing as an accepted cost. Some will need educating on what the manuscript needs, and that's why I do sample edits, even for developmental editing. There's a way to look at a manuscript and see what level of editing it's going to need without spending a ton of time on it. I'll talk about that a little bit later in the course. So sometimes you have to explain the different levels of editing and things like that, and they're often repeat clients. My experience with fiction writers is they don't often quit writing completely unless they've had a really bad experience. So you can control the process enough in self-publishing that you develop, you create your own experience, and that means that they will just keep writing books and get better and better at them. They often want referrals to other services. So I provide all levels of editing because I figure once a writer trusts me, it's good to keep it in the, keep it in the same hands. I work them into my schedule faster than new clients so that they can get their book out. But if you don't do copy editing and other types of editing like that, then it might be good to align with somebody or have a few names of people you can refer them to for the copy editing stage. That'll come over time. What was I going to say? Something very important. It'll come back to me. Okay, so why do they hire traditional developmental editor? Well, the point of any editing is to bring a book up to publishable quality. So that's what they want. They're looking for quality. They don't want to be skewered by bad reviews. They want their book to have a chance of succeeding. They want to put out the best possible book they can. And often, because developmental editing has a large teaching aspect to it, or it can, they want to learn to write better and sometimes to write more quickly. Even the container of having somebody waiting for your stuff, like if I schedule a writer for mid-October, they're going to get their stuff to me mid-October. I don't charge people really. I charge a non-refundable deposit of 10%, but I have never kept it without working on the manuscript. I just move them to a later slot. But so they generally tend to want to meet their deadlines. And they'll work with an editor just to learn. Okay, so the summary of all of that, the main idea, self-publishing writers are probably the biggest market for freelance editors. Writers aiming for traditional publication are a bit of a smaller market, but they are equally fun to work with and interesting. Before we move on, the MFA, I just wanted to swing by there. It's big business. There's something like, there's hundreds and hundreds of MFA programs around the world, and I'm not knocking them. I have one. I loved it. It was really fun to just focus on my writing for 2 years. My kids were little when I did it, but so I had to really, really focus. I did a low residency one, but I learned more in 2 years of writing and studying fiction and being mentored by writers than I had in the previous 20 years on my own, going to night school and all that stuff, and writing bad novel after bad novel. But the point of showing you these numbers is to let you know that there's a ton of MFA graduates out there. These figures are old. 2017. This came from a magazine, and there is no updated version of it that I could find. It's not cheap to do an MFA, but there's a bit of a disconnect here. The best-selling writers with MFAs are only 7%. Does anybody have any guesses about why that might be? Because it takes a different type of, I think it takes a different type of ambition to show up on a bestseller list than it does to do an MFA. MFA might tell you a lot about the craft of writing, but it doesn't mean you're going to continue writing when it's over. I have another question. I hardly ever work with writers who have MFAs. It's happened maybe once in like 12 years. Any guesses about why that might be? I mean, yes.
I would imagine they think they've been through the schooling and they have what they need without having to pay somebody else.
Close, yeah. In fact, that's probably true of some of them. And the other thing is they swap manuscripts because you make connections. So they already have on tap a bunch of writer friends who know as much as a developmental editor about prose, but might not necessarily know how to developmentally edit. But yeah, something like that. Okay, so where do we come in the writer's trajectory? I'm just going to read this. The writer writes the novel. Then they have doubts for whatever reason. Maybe all their beta readers say it needs work, or nobody will finish it. So they'll come to a developmental editor and ask I treat these as an either or. It's a developmental edit or a manuscript evaluation. I don't treat one as a precursor to the other. Because basically, I'll go over the differences later in the course, but they're very similar. They're both a big picture look at the manuscript. Then they take it back and they do a revision based on your feedback. And then sometimes especially if they're going to self-publish, they'll ask for a second pass because they might have the story well in hand, but the prose needs some work, or it's riddled with typos, or they don't know how to use punctuation. That's fine. I call it the second pass. I refer to as line editing or copy editing, depending on the situation. If they're going to pitch to agents, they don't always need every comma fixed, but they do need the prose to be pretty high quality. If they're going to self-publish, they need both. So, okay. And then they do their thing after that. So we're fairly early in the process. And by the way, there is no set terminology. 10 different editors might refer to a manuscript evaluation and mean 10 different things. So that's why editors usually have pretty thorough explanations on their websites about what they mean by something. Okay. Oh, God, here's the embarrassing part, but I have to do it. It's in service of a look at whether you want to do this type of job. Okay, here it is. You're going to have way too much information about me by the time this class is over. I just want to say first, it is a great way to live. The positives are you get to read books almost all day long. I mean, several hours a day. You get to set your own time and do your own thing. You get to work with people you want to work with. The negatives are it's deadline oriented, so it can be stressful sometimes. As I mentioned, I don't like missing deadlines. And because of that, you have to be able to project manage. So if you're not keen on project managing, I'm going to teach how I project manage in the next little while, but like 6 weeks. But it doesn't take a lot. You don't need critical paths and complicated, Gantt charts or anything, but you do need to be able to manage your time. Okay, so here's a snapshot. I work on between 2 and 4 manuscripts at a time. And my turnaround time for a manuscript is 3 to 5 weeks. And I'm doing 3 different levels of editing. I almost never copy edit unless I've already done a first pass big picture edit. But I will line edit because I like that. I enjoy it. My sweet spot is 2. I regularly end up with 4. So sometimes I work really long hours. Right now I'm delivering a romance today. I have a hard science fiction that is due September 25th. And I have women's fiction. It's short. It's about 65,000 words. Also due at the end of September. And then I'm starting a packet exchange with a paranormal romance writer, and this is our 4th book together. So that's the kind of stuff I'm working on. Packet exchange means I just take it in chunks, like 2 or 3 chapters.
Pat, can I ask you how long would each of those manuscripts be on your desk, roughly?
On my desk, as in I'm working on it?
Yeah, like you got 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. So how long are you spending with each one of those? I work in time blocks of about 90 minutes, and I'll work on whatever has the most energy for me when I come in. Sometimes I'll be doing a book map on one, and then my brain will need to switch, and I'll read the first 50 pages of a new manuscript. So I mean total time for
each manuscript. I think when I started it was 40 to 60 hours per manuscript, but now it's probably a lot less. It's probably about 30, 35 hours or something, depending on the length, because 65,000 words is a lot different than 130. I worked on one manuscript that was 210,000 words, and the job was to cut 80,000 words, but you can't just cut the first 80. Unfortunately. No, it was such a good novel. It was really good. The writer actually won a prize. She self-published, and she won a prize with it, but it was like set in old Hollywood. It was very glamorous. Anyway, so it's a great job. I do work on multiple manuscripts at a time, and I am pretty good at managing my time. And I'll show you the ridiculously simple thing I do. This, I do developmental edits, manuscript evaluations, and second passes that are a line edit, copy edit, or both, depending on. Most of my editing work is fiction, about 70%. I love nonfiction. It's easier than fiction in my mind. And my primary areas there are self-help, how-to, and memoir. Memoir is kind of straddles the line between fiction and non because it's told in scenes like fiction. But I have worked on, I've worked on a fair amount of nonfiction, and I just really enjoy it. My clients are split 50-50 sometimes between aiming for traditional publication and planning to self-publish. You know, some months everybody's self-publishing, some months I've got 3 out of 4 that are aiming to pitch an agent with their manuscript after we're done. I'm a generalist, so I do anything, any genre. If I'm not familiar with enough with a genre to do it, I'll just tell the writer. But I really like working cross-genre. I believe a story is a story, whether it's literary fiction or science fiction or thriller or coming-of-age tale. And you know, there is, like Margaret Atwood, is she literary fiction? She also writes what could be called science fiction. I consider literary sort of a genre by itself, but it bleeds into. There can be really well-written commercial fiction that, you know, it's kind of a judgment call whether you call it literary fiction. I was reading the first few pages of the Booker Prize long list. Anybody familiar with the Booker Prize? It's a big literary fiction prize. Comes out of the UK. I think it's worth like £50,000 or euros or something, but it's mostly, you know, it's a feather in the writer's cap. And I was amazed at how much exposition there was in the first 5 pages of the excerpts that were on the Booker Prize site. It was just very old-fashioned, kind of slow literary writing. And, you know, I've read a lot of Booker Prize novels because I like them, and they're not always like that. It's not been every year. Sometimes they have some real plot-driven literary fiction. But anyway, so I work cross-genre. I don't, I suppose, you know, I don't work on books with misogyny or things that I object to. But I'm fairly open-minded. I work on erotica and other genres, or I forget what they call it, erotic romance. Not very often, you know, it sells really well, but it's not, the writer doesn't need to aim for excellence. You know, it's not really about the plot. So I don't work on a lot of that, but I do. So the advantage of generalizing, just when you're thinking about yourselves, I don't get bored. I don't get locked into only one way of seeing stories. And the disadvantage is that I don't know as much about a particular genre as, for example, an editor who specializes in just in space opera or fantasy. So it's totally up to you. I do work regularly with hard science fiction. I work with a guy who has a novel pretty much every year, and there are over 100,000 words. I do all the levels of editing on it. And he knows I don't know science because, you know, it's clear. I know story structure, fiction craft, that kind of stuff, but he doesn't rely on me to verify that the science makes sense, because we have that understanding that he sees other people for that. He's got science friends. So the advantage of specializing is that you can learn a genre's tropes really well, and in certain fields, there's a strong writer network. So being visible there, going to their conferences, stuff like that, getting referrals from one writer to another in that genre can give you really steady work. Okay, we're almost done. Additional smaller gigs. I do short stories, story collections. I edit scripts for a guy who posts videos on YouTube. I do some business editing, mostly for a translation company that's local. This is stuff I just kind of picked up along the way, especially early when I was trying to make money, trying to trying to pay the rent every month. I picked up anything I could get. But, I kept them because these small, fairly regular jobs are great to fill in the gaps between the larger manuscripts and to give your brain a rest. Okay, I do some coaching for writers. I teach fiction writing. Right now I teach it online. I taught it live for 5 years to marginalized writers from the downtown east side, which is Canada's poorest postal code. So they're suffering from addiction, mental illness, extreme poverty. And I just really like teaching to people who have fantastic stories but don't necessarily know much about fiction, so they can kind of get some distance from their own experience as well by turning it into a short story or whatever their jam is. Okay, last one. I write fiction and nonfiction. I sort of have an agent. I haven't sent her anything for a while. I don't think she's my agent anymore. I think she's representing mostly middle grade now. I wouldn't say I'm successful at getting it published. I'm getting a book published in 2024, so that's nice. But it was kind of an accident. And the only other one I've had, thanks Olivia, the only other one that I've had published was also an accident. So so although I have incredible fun writing fiction, it's not how I make a living. I will self-publish all my nonfiction. You can see one of them on this slide. It's called fiction editing, a writer's roadmap. Because it's such a niche. I write such niche nonfiction that there's really no point in trying to get an editor. So, okay.
Quick question, Pat.
Yeah.
When you talk about 2 passes, and we'll probably cover this later, but are you, because this always seems to be confusion between passes and rounds. You're
Yeah.
saying you do a pass, you make your comments, you do another pass, but then you hand it back to the author one time.
Really,
Or do you mean it comes back from the author and then you give them back another round of editing?
I should have said rounds. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know why I call it passes. Thank you. I should fix that on the slide.
No, I've asked editors, I hear the opposite answers constantly. So
yeah. So the first round
Thank you.
is the big picture, and then they take it back, and there's really no point in line editing something that hasn't been revised yet, because if I'm suggesting they cut that scene or conflate 2 characters into one better character, then polishing their prose doesn't make sense at that point. So then they take it back, revise, and then I take it back for round 2. And in round 2, I do line editing first, but they don't see it after I line edit it. I also copy edit it. So I'll do 2 passes in round 2. Because, that just seems to work for the writers I work with. But people sometimes will do 2 or 3 passes in a round. Okay, I'm showing you this, my trajectory, not because I'm an egomaniac, but because I want you to know that no matter where you are in your life, when you start editing or start thinking about getting into editing, it can be the perfect pathway to working with writers. I came into the field without any intention to do this type of work until I realized it was the perfect job for me. So I started as an avid reader, from being a kid. Then I did an undergrad degree. I studied history and psych. There's a lot of writing, mostly in history. Then I had a day job, but I also was a serious writer and a beta reader. And by serious, I don't mean good. I mean, I was serious about it. I wrote a lot. Like I wrote a novel every 4 years, getting up at 5, to do it before work. And my job required a lot of travel and long hours. So I just found it and I was like, are you kidding? This is so much fun, yet it's so hard, yet it's such a challenge. It was like one of those things where if you don't do it, you're going to regret it. So I did that for a long time. And then I went back to school because I was tired of writing bad novels on my own. And that's when I got an MFA. And that's also when I realized I had a talent for reading. That's all it takes to be an editor. It doesn't take knowing how to write. But if you are a good reader, you have a mind, a reading sensibility, you can develop it. You don't need to start with it. Then you can be a good editor, a very good editor. And then after that, I've been doing that for about 12 years. And I also I edit full time. I would say that's the bulk of my income. That's like 80% of my income. I do teaching and writing, but that's chump change. Okay, any questions? I know this was a long lesson. It was over an hour. I apologize for that. It was part of the fumbling around to the code. Shall we take a break? If you have questions, you can pop them in the Slack. So I'm going to turn off my camera and we'll be back here in 5 minutes. Isn't very long. Sorry about that. My time here is 4:37, it looks like. So 4:43 or whatever that is in your neck of the woods. All righty. Let's do this thing. Got a little bit of time. We're over the big one. Okay, this lesson is about what to expect from the course. Anybody know who this is on the slide? Man sitting at his desk again. It's Charles Dickens. Because I have great expectations. Okay, learn by doing. That's what we're doing here. That is the whole point. To me, it's one of the best ways to learn. So, we're going to get familiar with the system I use to developmentally edit fiction. And system does sound a little bit, cold, but for, like any job you do repeatedly, having a system just helps you do it better with less wheel spinning. So there's nothing wrong with systems. They're very important for running a business, actually. You will already know from the registration material that there's an unpublished novella manuscript in the works. It's about 30,000 words long, so it's half the length of a relatively short novel. So it's not exactly like a novel in certain respects, and we'll discuss those next week, but it will give you a cohesive story and let you work in quite serious detail, going step by step through everything I do when I developmentally edit fiction. You'll get the manuscript next week at the end of class. I need the non-disclosure agreements before I can release it and all that stuff. So I wanted to give you some time for that. Your first process will be what I call active reading and manuscript markup. You might already do active reading, but I'm going to explain what I mean by it, and you're going to comment marginally in the manuscript that we're using. If you have any problem using Word comments, we can do it another way, so don't worry about that. I will give you general feedback on your commentary style. It'll be more sort of a global assessment of what types of comments you make and, what your tone's like, things like that. It won't be a comment by comment response or anything like that. After that, so we're now in week 4, we'll do the book map. I think to be a good developmental editor, you need an interest in analyzing dramatic structure and other big picture elements of a novel. So that can be learned, and we will go through how to do it mostly in week 4, the book map, and in week 5, the editorial letter. Even if you decide you don't like doing book maps, doing one in this course will let you see manuscripts more clearly in the future. All you have to do when you're looking at a manuscript, even if you don't do a book map, is think about what it would feel like if you had to do a book map, and that'll give you a good sense of what what some of the issues in the manuscript are. And if you like them, that's great. Some editors love them, and they can really blow a writer's mind too, which is fun. The next and last learn by doing element is the editorial letter. So if you have never had one or seen one, I had never seen one when I started editing. It's a document you send the writer along with their marked up manuscript. In my opinion, it's very, very important for developmental editing, not so much for line editing or copy editing. I feel like it can make or break the writer's experience. So you're going to write one to the writer of this manuscript, and I'm going to give you feedback on it. You don't have a lot of time to write it, so it can be bad. It can be poorly done. It doesn't have to be good, but I think it'll be a good experience to get feedback on it. Throughout this course, in class and on Slack, we can explore the business. I mentioned earlier, I've worked with writers who've been scarred by the experience of working with a freelance editor who didn't have the business end down, who was a little too loose on the business end, or was just not, ghosted them. So I'm a big believer in professionalism as a gateway to a viable business, whether you do it part-time or full-time. And I just want to reiterate, this is my process, and you'll develop your own approach. So if you find after this course that the first few developmental edits you do take on a different shape, that's absolutely fine. As long as it works for you and it works for the client, and you deliver your scope of work for the manuscript, and we'll talk about what the developmental edit scope of work can look like. How you do it is up to you. I do think that knowing one way of doing it, the way we're going to go through this course, will help you get to your way faster, because you won't be trial and erroring it. And then you can refine and create better systems for your way, which will let you do it better first, also more quickly, and then you can earn a better living for yourself. Oops, texts. There will be certain assigned pages from both of these: the Editor's Lexicon by Sarah Cipher and the Jinna book. The weekly packet I mentioned also has a bit of supplemental reading. But the real work of the course is on the manuscript itself. If you don't have time to do everything, just do the homework on the manuscript. You can finish the reading later. You don't have to do it all during the course. Any special software? Not really. Most editors use Word because of its features, track changes, and marginal comments. And I use it also because it counts the words, which I use for book maps. If you don't have Word, we can work around it. I have worked with people who just use Google Docs, but I download it as a Word document when I'm giving feedback on their editorial letter, and then I make comments in the margins and send it back to them as a Word document. Actually, I think I have uploaded it as a Google Doc again, but so that works too. It's not the best, but it's okay. It's just that when you do work as an editor, you will end up needing to use Word all the time. The two optional items are Excel and Perfected. Excel comes with Word usually as part of Office 365 or Microsoft 365, so you'll have it anyways, likely. If you don't like Excel, you can use a table in Word to do the book map. I use it for book maps. So there's ways around using it if you don't want it. And Perfected, you don't need to do it. You don't need to have it for this course. It's an add-in software for Word. But you can try it out if you want to. There's a 14-day free trial on their website. And after that, it's $70 US a year. So if you do want to try it, and I'll explain what I use it for when we get there, but if you did want to try it, you can just use the free trial and then see how you feel about it. But don't get it until between week 3 and 4, because that's when you're going to try using it, is for week 5's assignment, the editorial letter. And you can absolutely write an editorial letter without Perfected. I didn't even have Perfected till about, I don't know, maybe 2019, 2017, something like that. I didn't use it for years. I didn't even know about it. It's meant to be a consistency checker, but I use it for a different feature that helps me write editorial letters. Okay. Oh, this is in your packet. You don't have to really know any of this. There's a schedule, basically. So there's only 3 weeks where you have assignments. Week 1, which is there's a questionnaire in your packet, and I put it on Slack. It'll be pretty quick, I think. Week 3, your manuscript markup, send it to me. It's right before week 4, so you have 2 weeks to mark up the manuscript. You won't need it. Novellas are pretty short, but you know, if you're super busy, you might need it. Doesn't hurt. And then week 5, you have a very limited time to write the editorial letter, and I need it right before the day before the last class, and I need them all at the same time because I have a certain system for marking them. So you have to be on time, or you just won't get feedback at all. And that's true of all of the deadlines, except the first one, the questionnaire. I don't really give feedback on those. We can chat. I read them for sure, and we can chat about them. Sometimes it's very interesting. I know already there's a couple students in this class who read the same stuff, live in the same city. You know, it's uncanny. So it's nice to know what other people are reading and what their vibe is and what they're into, so that ideally, and this has happened with almost every cohort of this course, is that you can stay in touch after support each other with critiques of each other's websites and different stuff that you're developing as you go through. There's a group that still meets for 2.5 years later. They meet once a month on Zoom and just talk about their editing stuff and their whatever they're working on. So it's a good opportunity because when I started editing, I didn't know any editors at all. I just made the whole thing up. It's crazy that I even made it this far. So it's really a lot better if you can kind of normalize it. And there will be an alumni, Editorial Arts Academy alumni group, but it's pretty quiet on Slack. Susanna's going to move it to Circle. I'm in there once in a while, but if you want to get hold of me there after the course, you could just use the @PatDoby, or you can email me, anything like that. Okay. So that was the schedule. Look how short that lesson was compared to the last one. If this was a novel, I would say the structure needed work. Any questions? Okay, let's go on to the third and final lesson. It's all about you. That'll be a nice change. So we're thinking about where you fit. This is really for you to just think about yourselves. If we have time, which we very well might, I wouldn't mind doing a little go around just with your initial thoughts. I call them sit reps, situation report. And I try and fit one in every class where we just go around and say, what we're thinking about. But until then, we'll just go on to this lesson. Oops. Okay. Where do you fit? I would like you to consider your own background. Are you a writer, an editor already, an avid reader? There is room for everyone. No one background is better than another. The real question in asking you to think about this is, what aspects of your background can you apply to developmentally editing fiction? The job does use many skills and capabilities. Education. You don't need to have studied or written fiction, as I mentioned, to be a good developmental editor. You do need to study the craft of writing, and ideally, as time goes by, you would pick up information on the publishing industry, just so you can help writers. So if there are some weaknesses or gaps in your knowledge as you go through this course, which has some fundamentals, the basics, everything you cover in a developmental edit is covered in this course, but it doesn't go as deep as you could go on your own afterwards. So if you spot any gaps or things that are, a challenge for you when you're reading published work, if you're thinking something like, where's the conflict in this scene? Or, is this omniscient? I'm not quite clear on the point of view. Things like that, that you have to have the vocabulary for eventually when you work with intermediate or advanced writers. Then you will want to study that stuff on your own. So I put a list of books that I really like in the week 1 package. And then I picked up other book titles over the course of just my life, and from students in this course, stuff they like, and I put them in the final package as well. So there's tons of resources out there. It just might take a while. Okay, genre. Do you have a favorite one? Things that you like to read? Or are you omnivorous? So I've already talked about that a bit, and we'll keep covering it. If you do like a particular genre, you probably already know quite a bit about it. But if you're thinking about getting into a genre that you read avidly, there might be some things, tropes and things that you need to pick up on. Like, for example, romance basically is built around obstacles to love, and we'll have a happily ever after or a happily for now. It can be that simple for you to get through a book with a relatively novice writer. Yeah, depending, and there's lots of subgenres there's a crazy number of subgenres. So it just it's nothing to you don't have to make a decision by the end of the course about what type of book you want to work with. I never decided, so that's why I work with all types of books. But if you already know who you want to work with, that's great. Okay. And do you have any niche expertise? That can be very handy. There can be good traction between the type of book you like to read and who you are in your personal life. for example, or what you've studied in school. You might know a lot about a historical period like Regency England or the Second World War. If you market to those writers, you will find your client base. Or you might have a hobby like falconry or chess, or you might know a lot about a geographical area, like Japan. So I write historical fiction sometimes, and I plan to write one set in Japan. I've never been to Japan. It's a pretty big problem. And so if I found an editor who worked on historical fiction, who was a good fit for my material and who was familiar with Japan or had been to Japan, that would be a no-brainer. If it was between them and another equally talented and educated editor, I would go with the one who had the experience of Japan. So having some kind of niche expertise, even if you haven't thought of it that way, can come in handy. If you, for example, I've had, lawyers come through the course and they can work with legal thrillers in a way that a non-lawyer is kind of like me with the science fiction writer. I have to say, I don't know science, so beyond the basics. So that's something to think about. Motivation. You'll get a chance as you go through the Learn by Doing to really think about why you're interested in developmentally editing fiction. It sounds like everybody is already pretty motivated, already knows what they're interested, why you're interested. It is a very fun job. I think there's no question that it's a good idea. And your own strengths and weaknesses. You'll get a sense of those. So I have certain strengths, and I am not so good at other things. Doing the actual work of, manuscript markup particularly, and writing an editorial letter will show you where the gaps lie in your own abilities. You might be a great reader, but if you have trouble writing or doing analysis of literary stuff, then that could be a weakness until you build it up into a strength. Every single thing that you do in the job can be learned. There's no, talent is great, but it's completely doable by anyone, I think. You have to love reading, really. That's the basic requirement. Doing a book map will show you whether the structural analysis involved there is something you want to engage in and offer. So I have an editor friend who I showed her how to do a book map, and her eyes glazed over. And then she phoned me partway through her first book map and said, is it really supposed to take this long? She was dying, she was ready. Anyway. So the point is, as you go through the course, you might decide you just want to focus on certain parts of it, like being a paid beta reader, just a less intense version of being a developmental editor. Okay, I'm going to take a peek by statistical land, because there's this slide that shows just how much money is in fiction. This is from 2018, so it's old. These statistics are all over the internet, and sometimes they're being given in 2022 and 2023 with no citation. So it seems like they got sticky, and then they always come up in any search. It's not comprehensive by any means, but romance and erotica is huge. If you like working in that field, the thing to remember there is that romance writers, especially self-publishing, generally pay less. Editing is not considered crucial in that field, so you'd have to churn more work through than if you worked, say, with plot heavy stuff like mysteries or thrillers, or if you worked with literary fiction, which has to be excellent. Crime and mystery, religious, inspirational, science fiction and fantasy. Children and young adult, it's not even a genre. It's middle grade is a category, and young adult is a category. And so, although I was unable to replace this slide with something better, I wanted to let you know the numbers are high. Young adult has grown in terms of market share over the last while. So if you like reading young adult fiction, it's a growing field. Adult fiction is still growing as well. Basically fiction is growing. Actually, nonfiction is going down a bit. 34% of all ebooks sold are self-published. So ebooks are it's easier to self-publish an ebook than it is to self-publish a print book, just because you don't have to pay the same attention to Amazon. But there are $1.25 billion worth of self-published books published each year. And the market, so it's increased by 264% in the last 5 years, and the market is growing. And the only reason I'm telling you this is because you can get into any genre you like, or you can work cross-genre, and there will never be a shortage of work. There is tons of work out there, and there's lots of people writing who weren't writing before. I think the pandemic had something to do with that. I've read books that actually, they're published traditionally, they're in the library now, where it says in the acknowledgements, I wrote this during the pandemic. Sometimes it's their first novel, so it doesn't necessarily take 10 years to get a book published. But the other part of that is that people who weren't writing fiction before are now trying their hand at it. And there's there's room for everybody. And I really encourage, if you're editing, you've been doing it for a while, help other newer editors. It can be weird on social media, because sometimes, there's you don't want to get into a situation where you're mentoring somebody for free on social media, but there is, editors are very kind, giving people in general, a lot like teachers, actually. It's kind of a teaching job. So if you come across a newer editor of any age who's looking for help, kind of like writers, they're all very kind to each other, mostly. Okay, so that's genre, and what are you good at, and what do you know a lot about. But this is more about, how do you read? And here's a definition of sensibility from the Oxford English Dictionary: the quality of being readily and strongly affected by emotional or artistic influences and experiences. Emotional awareness, susceptibility or sensitivity to, keen awareness of. I would say this is your defining characteristic as a reader and as a developmental editor, is your reading sensibility, your ability to get into the experience of reading a book. It's the ability to interact, basically, with a text that lets you see inside its inner workings, and it can be developed. You wouldn't even be in this course if you didn't already have a good reading sensibility, if you didn't already feel like reading was an experience that you were pretty heavily engaged in whenever you read a book. So it's not really about what you like in terms of your favorite types of novels, but more about your own receptivity to the reading experience. Your sensibility and your full engagement with what you're reading will help you define what works and what doesn't work in a particular manuscript, or what works and what needs work. I like to think about both, because writers can be ruthless with themselves and can throw out the good stuff by, thinking one comment replies to everything. So I'll show you when I do an editorial letter, and when I comment marginally, I try to have a measure of both, praise and questions or issues and stuff like that. If you're not sure what I mean by reading sensibility and being, able to engage with and focus on a text, don't worry about it, because it'll come out when you start reading the manuscript. I get to this aspect of editing is why I have a system, because you need to be able to focus. It's not one of those things you can multitask on. So that this part of the system is enabling you to create a little container for yourself of time and space, and that you can just do, even if it's only 15 or 20 minutes or half an hour on one manuscript, pay full attention to it. All right. I hope that made sense. Okay, this is great. We're going to have time for a little go around, which is unusual. I'm going to have to change that monster first lesson to two, but the generally we start, we get more and more material. So this is kind of the shortest week. And then it gets really close to the finish line. Okay, here's the key takeaways for week 1. A writer's publishing goals will motivate them to work with a developmental editor. Self-publishing is a growth industry, for sure, and editing is an accepted cost to many, but not all, indie authors. And, sometimes I do a sample edit for a person who's planning to self-publish, and they go away and, they say thank you or whatever, and then that I don't hear from them again. And then 2-4 years later, they'll come back and say, I remember your sample edit. I worked with a different editor. Either it was a mistake or I want to work with you now. It just depends. And because writers will also become educated. So anytime you are talking to a writer, it's always good to even just treat yourself as a free resource for the first little while, first email or so. And sometimes they just go away because they're not ready. And that's fine. They'll be ready and they'll probably come back if you're good to them. Writers seeking traditional publication also hire developmental editors because publishers rarely take on novels that need much big picture work. Knowing your strengths and sensibilities will help you market your services. And that's not really about getting, your calendar full. It's more about finding the people you want to work with, finding the kinds of books that are going to make you happy to be sitting down to read. When I first started editing, I read some excruciating stuff that I could only do half an hour at a time because it was so painful. But, it was all in service of learning how to do it. And now I never work on anything I don't like. It's very, very rare. So knowing what you like really helps. Your strengths will change with experience and study. It's a long-term development process requiring a deep interest in fiction. So I'm still getting a handle on character arc, even though I've been into fiction since I was in my 20s, and I have been editing fiction for 12 years. I still am learning new stuff all the time. And I don't read as many craft books as I used to, but I certainly keep learning. Okay. Here's the assignments. Dun, 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 dun. Do the assigned reading listed in your week 1 packet. I don't think it's a lot. And as I say, if you have to choose between that and doing the questionnaire, do the questionnaire. That's number 2. Complete the self-assessment questionnaire and send it to me by 11 p.m. Sunday. I say that because, Kate, you can send it later. I'm just realizing you're 11 I don't know, 11 p.m. your time, Sunday, for this one. The rest are Pacific time. Oh boy. It's just because I read them on Monday and then we meet on Tuesday, and I like reading them before I meet with you guys in case we have something in common about the reading. Sooner is fine too if you do it sooner. Mark your calendar to block out time for the coursework. So in your packet, the Word document you're going to receive either tonight or tomorrow, there's a couple of pages on how long I think it might take you to do things. I actually have no idea. I'm just guessing. But I've guessed big times. You might not need all that time. But if you look at your calendar between now and October, is it 17th that we finish? And if you're in Canada, I'm not sure if Thanksgiving is in there, but we have ours in October. So, you might have to work around some holidays. You might have to, just if you can, pre-block your time for working on the course. On the course material. If you haven't already done it, read, sign, and return the NDA so I can send stuff to you. And get on Slack and say hello if you haven't already. You guys are good for getting on Slack. I've been impressed. Next week, meet the project and the writer. The developmental edit unpacked. That's kind of like a flyover of the whole process, and then we'll actually do the process. But I'd like you to see where it's going before we start it. And then active reading how to, the thing that I think will save your life if you're working on more than one manuscript at a time. Sit reps, that's the situation reports. And that I always hope to fit in. And then assignments, Q&A. There's Q&A after each lesson, and then there's a Q&A at the end, which is where we're going now. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns?
I have a question. So you said you don't work on anything you don't like. So
Yeah.
how do you handle it if you start reading something and you realize it's not for you? Or do you kind of have a way to sort of weed those things out ahead of time so you don't end up in that situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I use the sample edit. I never work on a project unless it's a repeat client. I never work on a project without doing a sample edit first. Even if
Okay.
they've had a referral, I work with a ghostwriter who sends me a lot of referrals, and I still do a sample edit. I do it for free. I don't charge. It takes me an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. I came from an industry where proposals, you got all your work through proposals. And so it's when I started doing editing, I didn't even think twice about spending some time making sure I wanted the job and that, you know, they wanted me. So anyway, the sample edit is a good way to check if you like the stuff. I asked to see the whole manuscript. I read the first 10 pages and make a few marginal comments so they can get a sense of my reading style, reading sensibility. And then I scroll through the whole thing and see if it's actually complete, because once I did a developmental edit on a manuscript I thought was complete, and then I got to 60,000 words and the ending was missing. So that turned into me helping the writer develop an ending, which is still developmental editing, but it wasn't what I was expecting, and it took longer. I think I made $9 an hour on that one. That was early. That's not the kind of cash you want to make. So, but you will make mistakes. You'll cost weird. I don't charge by the hour. I do a per project cost, but you know, things will happen. So I read the first 10 pages, I scroll through the whole thing, make sure it's complete, and then I write them a memo with what I think. It first is boilerplate text, you know, text I send to everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to read your stuff. Here's my impressions of the pages I read, and then I'm completely honest. And if they don't like what I have to say, then they just don't, you know, they don't engage to work with me. And if I don't want to work with them, I don't make an offer. I don't offer to work with them. I say, I don't think you're ready, or this is not really a great fit. I put that in the memo, but I always still send them the memo because I've already read their stuff and I've already figured out what I think. So it builds good relationships. I don't like turning writers down. I think often there's a period where we correspond a little bit before I offer a sample edit. And if I get a red flag vibe, I'll just say my schedule is full. So for example, if they're, you know, super entitled, or they describe their book and it doesn't sound like something I'd be into, then I just say my schedule's full. But that doesn't happen very often. I think between my website and my profiles and my testimonials and stuff, by the time somebody gets to the point of sending me an email, it sort of self-selects. They read themselves out. And that's one of the reasons it's handy to have a website. And if you belong to an organization like the Editorial Freelancers Association or any of the other national organizations, you get a free, it's included in your membership, you get a profile. And the way you write that profile will also help people decide if you're a good fit. Yeah. I've only been.
I'm sorry.
No
Go
worries.
on.
Wasn't important.
Oh, sorry. I just have a piggyback question.
Yeah.
What if the premise of someone's book is interesting, but you don't like their writing style? Is it sort of the same situation?
That's a little different. That's a good one too, because, you know, the writing style, it depends on how developed their prose is. If you don't like their writing style because it's just really amateurish, then that might be something I would still work on, just because I can help them develop the story, and then I can tell them about their prose needing work before it's publishable. But if I really find their sentences turgid or, hard to navigate, or just I'm yawning on the first page, then I would probably say it's not a good fit, despite having an interesting premise. Yeah, it depends on what they want too. If they're looking for line editing and I can show them how to make a 22-word sentence into a 9-word sentence without losing any meaning, then that's a fun challenge, but it's also kind of expensive because line editing is time consuming. Yeah.
I hope I'm not shifting the conversation topic too much, but I'm just curious. So to me, from the outside, being new to this field, if I'm being honest, like being freelance seems like a lot of work, right? Like you have to be comfortable with a certain level of like networking and putting yourself out there and like really pushing to meet and attract and find clients. And so I'm just curious, for someone like you with this incredible background and all this experience, like it seems to me you could absolutely work for a publisher if you wanted to. So I guess I'm just curious, what's your experience with, like, why have you chosen to stick with doing your own thing? Like, what are the pros of not trying to work with a big publisher, if that makes sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. I've been self-employed since forever. Like even when I worked as a logistics manager on international conferences, I was self-employed. I was I guess a consultant or something. So I just like managing my own time. I've hardly ever had a real job. I worked at McDonald's when I was a teenager, but other than that, I prefer to do my own thing. And I find business super creative. So the first few years were a slog. It would have been easier for me to go work for somebody. But I also was so interested in the work, in working with writers and in reading books. And I had already run a business before with a partner. So that in the trade show industry. So I knew certain things. I knew how to write a contract and stuff like that. But you can get all that online as well, I think. So yeah, I don't know if a publisher would have me. Honestly, I think I'm kind of odd, and I'm not sure, that maybe, but I just never meet them. I don't have the opportunity. I'm not in a publishing hub. Vancouver it's got a few small presses, but they don't pay well. And I can do better on my own than I can working for someone else. Yeah, I hope that answers the question, Hillary. I'm not sure if it did. Okay.
Sorry, I froze. Yes, no, it absolutely did. Thank you. And that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah, I would have loved to work with a publisher in the beginning, but I just didn't know how. I didn't know how to get a job, with a publisher. Because I thought maybe they would teach me how to do what I'm doing, but it's all free. There's still this sort of internship, as system in publishing. You work in a broom closet for 20 years, and then you get to acquire your own books.
Yeah. And a lot of those internships, at least to me, it seems like if you're not a current undergraduate or master's student, they're not really open to you. So it feels like a tough industry to transition to as a career change and do the traditional route. It feels like you really have to figure out how to do your own thing. So
yeah, I think so. I think getting into traditional publishing now, especially with all the mergers and buyouts, and Simon & Schuster just went to a sort of a media corporation or something. It's editing is not the point anymore. It's kind of like in Canada, there's this book chain called Chapters, and 70% of their stock isn't even books. It's throw blankets and scented candles. So publishing is kind of one of those. It's morphing really fast, and it's a lot of writers go to self-publish just because publishing is so hard to get into for work and for writers with their manuscripts. The other questions? Big questions? Can we do a little go around? Just a situation report. If I was going to give you one of my experience, it would be, I have really enjoyed this class. You guys have been great, very responsive, and I'm really looking forward to the next 5 weeks together, because I think it's going to be fun. Doesn't have to be about the class. It could be, okay, so the other part of my sit rep is you know, I don't normally work in a broom closet. I'd like you to know that. I don't feel like I have a lot of credibility given my milieu, but anyway. So can we go around and do, you can just either turn off your vid or say no, just pass if you don't want to do one, but let's start with Alan.
Well, I am excited for the rest of the class. I appreciate everything you had to show us today. I'm in a weird spot with fiction. As you know, Pat, I was kind of hemming and hawing about whether I jump into this class this time literally up to the last minute, or at least the last minute of the discount.
Yeah.
Jumped in on that. So I love fiction. It was my first love as a reader, for sure. I really, really dislike reading fiction that I don't like, which is why I thought initially, I don't feel that way about nonfiction. Nonfiction to me is very straightforward, even if it's kind of creative. So, I'm really eager to see even the manuscript that we do for the class, whether that's something that I like. If it's not, how I feel about spending time with it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at. I would like to have fiction in my overall portfolio for a break, and just variations and fun.
Yeah.
And I did enjoy working on this book that I just finished, even though the author was kind of a hot mess all the way through. For the developmental side, the line edit, he just took everything I gave him, but the developmental side was. I'm very curious to see what the book does. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's where I'm at.
Excellent. Thank you. Olivia, how about you?
I am so excited.
Yay!
This just like I was sitting here trying to formulate my answer, and I'm just like, all I have is like, I'm just really excited. I'm really excited to learn about book mapping, something I've never heard of before. I'm actually currently editing a book for my sister, which is complicated because neither one of us really knows what we're doing. And I'm just really excited to learn and just have that hands-on experience. And that's why I decided to sign up for this class, because when I saw we were going to do like a live edit and also all of your experience, I was like, this is gonna be awesome. So I'm really, really excited, and I just can't wait to see how this all goes. So,
Awesome. That is so encouraging.
Can I just say one other quick thing?
Yeah, sure.
That I wanted to say, for everybody else. I don't know if you guys are in the Facebook group, but people in the Facebook group are unbelievable. Every question that I had while I was doing my big edit, and it was a lot of weeks because I did the full developmental and a full line edit, I would just throw these questions out, and I just got such incredible, thoughtful responses and back and forth sometimes. Like the best Facebook group I've ever been in. So
fantastic. And for those who don't know, that's the Editorial Arts Academy. It's basically a support group for editors who've gone through the courses with the EAA and then are, hanging out their shingle and have questions about any aspect of it. Okay, yeah, thanks, Alan. That's good. Good thing. Okay, Tracy.
Okay, well, like everybody else, I'm excited. I'm still excited. I was excited when I came. I'm still excited. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing the edit on the manuscript. And yeah, this is just confirmed. I was a little skeptical, coming into just paying for another program.
I hear you.
But yeah, no, I feel so good about this decision, and I'm looking forward to this. Again, I'm not so sure it's necessarily hanging out a shingle, but definitely even in terms of my own writing and what I'm working on. So yeah, this is fantastic.
Awesome. And actually, every new editor is looking for a writer with a manuscript to guinea pig. So could be a match made in heaven somewhere around here. Danica, is it Danica, or how do you correct my pronunciation, please?
Yes, Danica.
Danica, thank you.
Sorry, my voice is kind of raw. I've had a cough for last week, so
Sorry to hear that.
Oh,
Oh, just looking for your sit rep. What's your situation?
yeah. What's my situation? I'm feeling good, other than my cough. Um,
Good.
yeah, so I write myself. I've been writing for books for about 16 years, I guess. So I'm just now getting into editing. This year I started copy editing and proofreading. Have only had a few clients so far, but I'm also working with a small press that my friend started as kind of a beta reader.
Great.
Not paid, it's like an internship,
Yeah.
but getting experience, and I want to add developmental editing as one of my services. So that's why I'm taking this class. I took the copy editing class last year.
Yeah.
So here I am, and I'm
Yeah.
ready to learn.
Excellent. You're getting your education. It's good. Hillary?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think it's really, really awesome that we get to work with an actual author out there who's willing to let kind of all of us have a go at their work in progress. I think that that's really brave of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I started my like exploration of the editorial process of copy editing, and like that was cool. I was really enjoying it, but I'm really excited about this because it feels like the part of teaching that I really, really loved, like that early, like helping writers identify their strengths and grow ideas and build a relationship with them. It feels like a much better fit for me. And so I'm stoked. I'm really excited to learn from your experience, Pat,
Excellent.
and everyone else.
Well, there you go. Awesome. How about you, Kate?
Well, I'm still totally jazzed about this learning your process and how to make a book map and all of that. In fact, I was just thinking, I'm in the process of working with an author, and I have a really good rapport with her, and I'm wondering if she'll let me practice on her, make a book map.
Yeah.
Her
Yeah.
script. I definitely learned by doing.
Yeah.
So if I can practice on the novella and then I can practice on hers, I'll feel like I'm more solid in what the process is and how to do it. So yeah,
Great.
I bet she'll let.
Excellent. Great idea. Oh, she'd probably love it. Gosh, writers are always looking for feedback.
Yeah.
Harley.
I'm still very excited. I'm think I'm most excited. I am really severely ADHD and also autistic, so I have to have a framework to build off of for things, which is part of what drew me to this class. Because you talk about you have this system, and you're going to walk us through it piece by piece, which is exactly what I need. Because if you give me a broad, here, write an editorial letter, but I have absolutely nothing to go off of,
Yeah.
my brain just totally short circuits. So it'll be really, really helpful. I also have a friend that I've been working with on her stuff, and so I know it'll be she will be very happy to let me practice on. I mean, I've already gone through her stuff, and I've been helping at the like base plot level for months. But it'll be kind of fun to go through and
Yeah.
do a book map for her, and that'll be fun. And it's kind of nice to get to know a little bit of both sides, the traditional and the self-published routes. I have both of my older siblings write. My older brother is published by HarperCollins, and then my sister self-publishes on Amazon and does relatively well for herself. So it's like I see both sides through them, but it's also fun to see it from the like editing side of things.
Yeah.
Especially with it's not really insider knowledge of how both sides work, but like
Right. Yeah.
I've seen the pitfalls of both sides, and so it's just kind of interesting to also see it from the how different, or maybe not quite so different, they are from the editing side.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But they're all writers in the end, and that's the good part. I really like writers. Okay, my goodness. thank you so much. We'll send you the playback and all that stuff. Stop the share. And you'll get it either tonight or tomorrow. And then I'll see y'all next week, and I'll see you on Slack. And you can email me directly if you have anything, any burning question. Slack is good too. You can do a direct message on there. So whatever you're more comfortable with. Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Pat.
Have a great week.